totally jumbo. Anyway,
let's talk about helmets. Good call,
Yeah.
Brett. We have these lovely things behind us. See, we have them in 3 various states of undoing.
yes. And what I want to talk about is what you should do or how you should go about getting ready when you purchase a helmet, obviously. You actually, if it's an unknown seller, you kind of got to go with what you get.
Yeah.
And I've actually seen down here in the workshop, wow, you paid how much for that?
Yeah.
I mean, wow. I mean, wow. I can't. You know how I am.
Yeah.
And you know what I will throw away before I ever send it.
Good.
And people are going 3 or 4 times beyond that and then charging
The same.
twice, maybe even more than what I ever would charge for something like that. So anyway, this here is one of my raw.
Clean pulls. Raw. Well,
This is a raw cat. This is a raw pull. This obviously, if this was going out as an unfinished helmet, this would actually, the flashing would be cleaned up.
See, most people won't do that though.
They'll do it generally. Well,
No.
Wolf does it.
Most people do not.
You know what? I would.
Hear me out here, people. I know most of the people who are on here and have bought helmets. The flashing at the bottom of your helmet, when you got it and it didn't come from Lone Wolf, did it have the flashing still on or off it? Flashing is typically on in my experience.
Ah, okay.
And I'm talking most people leave on the flashing.
I would leave the visors. I would leave the visor in, but I would not leave the flashing on.
Leave the visor in, leave the flashing on, and
It may not be
ships
like-
exactly like that.
So explain to people, if you said visor in, explain to them what you mean that it's not not an actual
Well,
visor.
when these are
Right
cast,
now, if you look,
Yeah.
and you'd have to
There you go.
hold it up so you
Perfect.
can see it. You can see it. It was initially a tape mold.
or a taped off visor.
It was a taped off visor, so it's actually so that the resin sticks to something, right?
so it
that-
doesn't
There's
backfill
no-
into the cavity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it looks like there's duct tape because this is a backfill. This is actually made out of resin right now. What'll happen is you cut this out, obviously, you cut up the flashing. Chuck likes to do a lot of other things to it, despite the fact that it doesn't really need it.
Let's just talk about first thing. You should always contact your seller.
Contact your seller.
is a big thing.
Okay.
And to make sure it's going to fit you.
Yes. Number one thing. I've actually bought several helmets that
Yes.
did not fit me.
Any good seller will know exactly what range a helmet will fit.
This is actually designed to fit my head. 100%. I am the mold for this.
I use matte as the if it
Large
fits
size.
if it fits matte, it's probably going to fit just about everybody. And I do have a second version of this helmet that is slightly smaller because a few people with smaller frames, they tend to be bobbleheads in this, and I have another helmet that's actually, I need to sell 2 more of these to pay for the molds for the new version of this and the new small one. So in the end, when we did put the original together before it's ever really even roughed in and finished, it had to fit matte. That was the main thing, because I knew if it fit matte, we would be pretty much good for just about anybody. And Royal Guards really should be stocky people, big guys.
You see, he's already started removing the flashing here. That's why it's got a nice clean edge. But in the back, it still has flashing on it.
Here's one that's waiting to be demolded, which I've actually demolded these on
God.
camera before. This is rotocast. All your resin helmets will be rotocast, meaning they will be dump resin in and then spin it around. And what happens is you will have flashing. This entire area here.
Excess.
This is all material that is ran out of the mold beyond the edge of the actual helmet. Some helmets will be more, some helmets will be less. This helmet will tend to have a lot of flashing here and here, meaning all the way up to the front, this area here, because this long draw, I'll turn that helmet around. This area here, that's a lot of travel for the resin, and it actually builds up speed. So your reaction time when the resin flows up to here is a little bit less, and you tend to have a lot more flashing towards the front, which you can actually see it in this right here. You have a lot of flashing at the front because it flows out, and then I will actually work this mold ball up, let it well up here, and then roll it back this way. And to properly fill this area, you'll actually have a lot of flashing also. Actually, before you ever do anything, you should actually take it and wash it with detergent. Primarily, almost all your resin cast helmets will be cast in a silicone mold, and the silicone will be present on the surface of your cast. And for future problems such as fish eyes and issues like that, when you paint, the very first thing you should do is not hot water, but warm water, dish detergent or dishwashing liquid or whatever. And I also like to use a red scuff pad, and I actually don't have one sitting around. Gently set it in the sink with warm water, not hot water, depending on your helmet and the material it's made out of, and odds are you probably don't know what resins were used. Some resins are more, will react more to heat than others. There's different types of resins, and those resins have different types of properties. This helmet is cast out of a material that is very, very much so heat resistant. If you really want to know the skinny, the softer the resin, the less heat resistant it is. You can have a helmet that maybe can withstand a decent sized drop, or maybe just a drop off the table or whatever, without any major damage. Or you could have a helmet that doesn't react to heat hardly at all, at least heat that this helmet would normally be subjected to, and it won't deform. But if you drop it, it will crack and it will break. So the more heat resistant, the more brittle it will be. Most helmets will crack and break when you drop them. Also, this is the stage where you would clean off. Starting out, the very first thing you do is you clean your edges and clean your flashing off. Then you find areas that can be possibly sanded and straightened out without body filler. Those areas that can't be straightened with body filler, you would move on to your body work.
So this would be body filler. This is,
Yeah.
Phase two.
this would be
This
phase.
is your second phase. Now, this is the time when you would be doing any repairs. My helmets don't have a mold line because they come out of a one-piece sock mold. Traditionally, most molds you will find, most helmets you'll find, will have some sort of a mold line, and you'll have to sand that out and clean it up. If you can't sand it and clean it up without body filler, then we're on to the body filler stage. And I also recommend don't use anything more aggressive than 180 grit on your helmet. 180 grit is finer than 80 grit. The reason why, you know how that works, right?
Not a clue, but
Okay.
I do know that
so
it
they
is.
take a square inch. This is a quick education. They take a square inch, and then they take the granule pieces that fit in a square inch. 80 grit, there are 80 pieces in a square inch.
Okay.
180 grit means it's a finer granule, means there's going to be 180
Yep.
in a square inch.
And now you know.
And that's how sandpaper works. When you're doing your flash cleanup, and you're also, you might as well go ahead, if possible, depending on the helmet, remove your visor. Now, if you're working on a Mando helmet,
Always leave filler.
the visor in place. If you take the visor all the way out in the early stages of like doing body work, like if you have a
Whooping.
seam line all the way across the helmet, and you got to do this, you got to fix this and fix that. If you take the visor out 100%, or I would even say just leave it in, the helmet
immediately what they do.
loses a lot of strength when you remove the visor. The only time it gets that strength back is when you glue a visor in. These things, these mandibles, you could actually easily crack and destroy your helmet if you didn't have a visor in it
Yep.
and tried to do body work.
100%.
So if you're doing repair work to your Mando helmet, leave the visor in. Don't take the visor out until after you've even primed. But the way I remove visors from helmets, or the visor cutouts, you know, where you need, I don't Dremel them out. Primarily, actually 90% of the time, you can still get to them from behind, and you sand them down from behind. And what that does is, if you go back to this guy here, where the visor hole is filled in, if you're sanding from the back side, when you get to this proper depth right here, the visor's literally going to fall out. if you Dremeled this out, you're not fixing the depth of where the visor opening is. What you're doing is you're cutting it, and you will have a jagged edge of, you know, these are resin poured, so nothing is uniformed on the inside. And the only way to get something uniformed on the inside is to sand it down flush with the visor opening. And that's how you get a nice flush opening that actually looks really good. I've seen, you know, we've had many people here that said, oh no, I'm going to do it this way. And I'm like, oh no, you got plenty of room. Let's do it this way. And then they go ahead and do it their way. And then they see me do another helmet for somebody else. And then they're like, oh, well, I should have done it like that because my visor opening is like this.
It's wavy.
Yeah, because the resin poured helmets will never be uniform and never be perfect on the inside. I personally recommend using a glaze putty instead of a full-on body filler. Most of the time, all you need to finish your helmets is this right here, glaze putty. It is a fantastic material, and you should never sand this with anything more than 180 grit.
And you will not need that much.
Yeah.
You need they come in this little tube. We have that for the shop.
This stuff is kind of expensive. This is more expensive than a gallon of Bondo body filler, but
it's worth it.
It is so worth it. It doesn't shrink. It has great adhesion properties. It does not stain paint, and it sands like a hot knife through butter. It will sand so fast that you will mess it up and have to redo it. That is how nice and how fast this sands.
It is pretty nice.
I mean, come on. I am a huge, I mean, I've been using this stuff for 20 years. So basically, once you got everything done, it's time to prime. I recommend only one primer, and I actually should stand up and get it because I forgot all about getting it over here. I've been messing around. I like to use a catalyzed primer here in the shop whenever possible. You do know that's already paid for and going in the mail in a few days. So I found that if you need a decent primer, off the shelf rattle can primer, this is what I found works the best so far, which is the Rust-Oleum automotive primers. They build halfway decent. If you give them plenty of time to cure, which I would actually, if you're worried about, if you're doing like say something that's black, I would give this an extra day or two of just sitting and breathing and curing, and set it in the sun if possible, as long as the heat doesn't get too hot to affect your helmet as far as softening the resin and making it warp or anything. But I would at least a minimum of 24 hours after you apply this. And if it's a darker color, I would wait even longer, maybe 2 to 3 days, depending on the weather and how hot and the humidity. If you're in the desert, it's going to leach out really quick. If you're in Ohio, the humidity and all the other fun stuff that goes along with that will slow the process of the solvents leaving. The longer you wait, the better it will be. Now this will, if you try to dry sand it, it will clog your paper. I recommend sanding it with a couple drops of dish soap in a bucket of water. Get a little bit, you don't need like super sudsy or anything, but the dish soap will help keep from clogging your paper. Don't worry about, I use regular sandpaper, wet. I don't worry about buying wet dry paper most of the time. It seems to work okay anyway. If you want a decent high build primer, this is it. It's Rust-Oleum's automotive primer. They also have a Rust-Oleum high build primer. I also recommend that. That's not bad. This comes in white, gray, light gray, and black. And then once that's done, it's time to paint. For painting, I always recommend everybody to, when you're doing your final primer sand, go ahead and grab your red scuff pad and scuff the whole thing in warm dish soap, sand it with warm dish soap, and then finish it off with dish soap and a red scuff pad. You'll get any places you may have missed when you initially did it, And you will also clean up any overspray that you had missed when you sanded. Like, you know, you sand back here and it gets fuzzy up here. The red scuff pad will clean that up and make everything nice and clean and uniform for painting. And the last thing I ever do before I paint one is over in the sink, warm water, a little bit of soap, and a red scuff pad. And or if I'm finishing up body work, I will hit the sanded primer areas with 320 paint. Use on metal and fiberglass surfaces for ultimate finishes.
Yeah, because that's not a fiberglass finish. Me
No.
personally, not knowing any better,
Okay.
I would see that and go,
Yeah.
this isn't what you're talking about.
To be honest, fiberglass is actually a type of plastic.
So it physically says use on metal and fiberglass surfaces
yes.
for
Yeah.
ultimate finish.
Yes.
And really what we're saying is it's still good to use on this type of product.
Now the real trick is the very beginning. And the very beginning, you hit it with a scuff pad and you hit it with soapy water. If there's silicone, even if you don't get all the silicone off when you first initially clean it in this stage right here, the brand new fresh out of the box stage, the less silicone is the better, because every time you sand, if there's silicone or greased oil or anything, you can sand, and when you sand, you're creating little valleys. And you can actually be pushing those impurities into your surface, and they won't show up until it's time to paint, and that's not a good thing. But once it's primed, if it's rough body work that you primed over, hit it with 180, go back over with 320. If body filler shows up, hit it with another coat of primer, because what will happen is body filler is much more porous than the resin itself and in the surrounding primer. And what will happen is you will have what's called a ring out, where the paint gets absorbed at a different rate into the body filler than it does in the primer and the resin. And what you'll end up with having is it'll be a ring. In the body industry, we just call them assholes. But what it is it's an area of what looks like shrinkage, but what it is, it's uneven absorption of the paint. So body filler, do not paint, ever do not paint over body filler that's exposed body filler. Put more primer back on it and sand it again. Don't paint over anything less than 320 grit. 320 is good for red. It's good for almost all your colors, unless you're going to be painting over a bright silver, or like an aluminum finish. Like if you're doing a Mando helmet, if you're doing a Mando helmet, you're probably going to want to paint over top of at least like 800 grit. If you're doing a black helmet, 5, maybe 600. I would do 600 grit. Black helmet, work it down with 320, finish it with 600 grit. If you're doing a chrome helmet, like a Mando helmet or a Phasma or something like that, don't paint on it unless you've sanded it down with 800 grit. 800 grit's the bare minimum for something like that.
And if you're really in doubt, just pay Chuck to do it.
If you're really in doubt, just send it here, and we'll take care of it and charge you appropriately. That's it. That was just a quick overview. Most of this will be in a soon-to-be upcoming Blaster Pro
Video tutorial.
helmet tutorial. Yes. I hope it's educational. I hope it helped. I don't know if anybody's out there doing helmets right now, but resin helmets are a fun thing and also a very scary thing. They can really throw you for a loop. There's several things that can happen, especially when you're starting to prep and you don't know what you're doing in the very beginning, and it can be very daunting.
And of course, Etsy, of course, we'll be working on. YouTube, go and check it out. Etsy.com/shop/blasterpro for all your blaster needs, except for right this minute.
If anybody out there wants a blaster, the entire inventory is almost completely available. If
Just
it's not,
text
let me
via
know.
the message.
You can actually go through Etsy, or you can go through Messenger.
And he can get your stuff too.
Yeah.
Next week, same blaster time, same blaster
Yes.
Same blaster time, same blaster channel.
Thank you, everybody. We will see you next week.
Bye-bye. I'll miss you. Mwah.